I am joined, of course, by Laure Jackson of Sante on Jersey. Hello, Anne.
Hello, Andy B. Happy birthday and congratulations to you. And it's great to see you again.
Thank you. I was thinking about Century Health because on Monday, as Joe came to the end of her pure brunch, which finishes at 12, we had planned for 12 p.m. to be the start of the festivities because 12 p.m., 23rd of September was the actual start of the station. So she's winding up in the last few minutes and we're listening into her show, knowing that Stephen's about to get ready to go into Studio One and start birthday week here at Pure. And we were so excited. I wasn't quite giddy, but I wasn't far off as she started to sum up what had gone on. And it's funny how much planning we've taken to make this a really good week. And yet when it came down to it, it still seems to surprise us.
Our brains are funny, aren't they?
I don't know whether that's a me thing, whether that's a human thing or what, but I thought, well, we've been planning this for like months, and now here we are. We're about to start, and I'm surprised. I
Yeah.
don't know what that's about.
Yeah. No, nothing sensory that I can find to speak into that either. But yeah, I hear you.
Just random Andy Venus. Right now, we are going on to all sorts of stuff in the coming weeks. We're looking at sensory health, of course. We've had a little pause across some of the summer, but would you like to just remind us as we sort of start afresh, perhaps? What is it that you do, and why am I talking to you?
Mm. It is an absolute blessing to have the opportunity to help people who don't realize how important their sensory health is. We know about emotional health, physical health, mental health, but it's a big unknown that I am trying to bring out there and expose, bring to the open, and show people and help the rest of society understand what is going on with those people who do really have sensory processing and integration issues that affects their coordination. They're more anxious. They have difficulties with sleeping and eating, relationships, wearing clothes because they're bothered by tags and seams. They're picky eaters. It just gets in the way of life in so many different areas, does sensory processing. So this opportunity to talk about those issues and to help people understand that it's real, and then how to actually address those issues with the sensory super system that I've created to try and help people do that assessment on themselves, or in like loads of schools, in businesses, offices, in families, home educating families, anybody who feels that there's something that's a little bit different and they're not functioning and flourishing the way that they want to. That's what the sensory super system is there to help assess those needs and then work out how to address those needs. And then I work with people for 3, 6, 12 months or longer, to help them really thrive in their sensory health and thrive in life.
And I think one of the bits that I've enjoyed, I suppose, enjoyed covering is the fact that we probably immediately think sensory health, oh, that's a child problem. It only affects kids under the age of 12 or whatever it is, this stereotype that we have, which I think actually is very prevalent in society. However, sensory health, and I love this, one of our very first questions was from someone in their 50s who'd had brain surgery. There was trauma from that. It affected their sensory health. And that's the point about sensory health. And we've got people now being diagnosed with ADHD much later in life. Possibly school has missed that. Perhaps it just said, oh, that's naughty behavior. They just couldn't sit still. Well, possibly. Maybe they're badly behaved. Maybe they're not. And that's actually quite an interesting thing. And then one of our new presenters says, oh, I live in a neurodivergent home. And I thought, I actually know what that means now to some extent. Whereas a year ago, I'd have thought, I don't have what's that word? But actually, she has ADHD. She's recently been diagnosed with that, and that's part of her story. And her family have got various elements of that. And I think it's interesting that as adults, we're starting to grasp that actually, maybe I wasn't a naughty child at school, and maybe all those timeouts and all those detentions at school, actually, in a sense, that was actually quite cruel because there was nothing wrong that I was being bad for. Actually, it was a sensory health issue, and we have to be, of course, careful not to use labels as an excuse. But I think it's good that we're getting better at recognizing it.
Yeah, yeah. It was really interesting. They're coaching this week. Very much a mum came in for a younger child, but said, actually, my daughter who's working, she's out there, she's in the world, she's doing her own thing, she lives in her own home. but is utterly exhausted by life. So the mum said, well, what about if we do this together? And they did some of the sensory-based motor observations, which is part of the assessment process that I do. Now, this girl was presenting more ADHD type, but by scratching the surface, by actually doing this, the mum was like, do you know, I can't believe what actually she can't do. And it's only when you do the assessment, when you take the time to look at things, simple things about being able to touch and sequence, your thumb to your fingers, really hard. There were lots of other physical things that she was trying to copy and couldn't put her body position in those kind of things. And that was never, ever addressed. So she's gone through the whole of her life up to this point, not realizing that physically she's not great. She just thought, well, she wasn't interested in sports. But that's also typical of our girls who will mask and who will perform incredibly well in certain areas, and try and cover up, not even meaning to, but just be very aware that they're not so good at certain things, but that brings in anxiety when they get a little bit pushed or stressed at work. Things are demanded of them, and they don't have those, they're just not rounded yet. They're not fully integrated because people think it's their mental capacity, but actually their physical capacity is really impacting their ability to focus, to have concentration, to follow conversations, all of those kind of things.
We've been working through a series of sensory healthy situations, scenarios, and places that we might be through. We looked at sensory healthy camping or sensory healthy offices, sensory healthy all sorts, sleeping. How do you have a sensory healthy sleep? I had another one because I heard someone recently talking about the importance of rest. This is a head teacher in a school, and they were saying, look, the thing is, one of the things, if I could change anything in society right now to make it better for the pupils in my secondary school, so what's that, 12 to 18-ish, I would say rest. It's the one thing, because they never switch off. They go home. They've got their mobile phones on. On a Sunday, there's no rest because they're doing this. There's no pausing. There's no stopping. And he was saying what we need in society is to go back right to the start of the Old Testament. What did God introduce? A 7-day week, 1 day of resting. Resting is the one thing that he would introduce. If he could do anything and have that sort of, I suppose, power, if you like, I would introduce a day of not forced rest, not stupidly making it happen in forced rest, but a day of rest, that day when it's different. So I thought, well, what does a sensory healthy day of rest look like? Whether you're somebody who goes to church and you're somebody who would describe yourself as faith or not, because it's very much a biblical idea, the seventh day off. What would a sensory healthy rest look like? Because that cadence isn't just the day, it's the build up to the day, it's the benefits as you come out of the day back into working again. So there's the question, what would a sensory healthy day of rest actually look like for us?
That is a very powerful thought, and would be amazing to think through and to tease through. The rest element, I think that we are so bombarded. I know we have to make it separate, we would have to think about each individual sensory thumbprint and make it fit for them. That's for sure. That's always going to be my answer, that it has to meet the sensory needs. But I do think generally our society is so full of sensory stimulation that actually pulling out the noise of the traffic, calming things down, shutting the shops, turning the music down or off, having times where it just reducing so much of that sensory overload that is in our systems that we don't even realize. A lot of the times, I suppose I'm thinking of being a city dweller, really. Those are things that would be more powerful. In the countryside, I think there would be less need for that. But still, it's just looking at what equipment can we turn off that is always vibrating in the background, or that we use a certain vehicle. I'm just thinking of like tractors in the countryside, those kind of things. It's just like, let's cut, what would happen if we cut the noise? Just allowed nature to be, and shut things down, so we don't have to even communicate it, like vocally, auditory wise, talking to people, engaging with people. That has a demand on our systems to process all of that. It'd be interesting, really interesting to just think through what that could look like for different people.
I know I probably touched on this once or twice. I do remember when Sunday trading laws changed. I very vividly remember that if you went into Saturday night and you needed fuel for Sunday, if you had not bought the fuel on a Saturday, you were not buying it on a Sunday because there was nowhere to buy it. You'd have to literally drive to a motorway, find a service station, which was very expensive, and get fuel that way. And I know people who would do that because they were kept open. But that's what you'd have to do. And I guess one of the things about the Sabbath, which is exactly what we're talking about right at the start of the Bible, 6 days of working, 1 day of rest. It's called the Sabbath, the day of rest. That's really important. And what changed when Sunday trading changed? It started, I believe this absolutely. I think it started the busyness that we have and
Mm.
this need to be busy because there used to be a day when we wouldn't work. And the important part, which I think, just taking it away from the Sabbath, which is a very religious word, but it's that seventh day of a different day, which is effectively what it is. Instead of working, you're doing something different. Now, as a Christian, that would be going to church, going to a church service, not doing your day job. But it's that difference, which I think is really central to why that seventh day is so fundamental to the cadence of our every day, every week, every month life.
Mm-hmm. It's a powerful unspoken thing, and it's interesting to see what does rest mean for people. And from a sensory perspective, that rest of withdrawing from everything that is going on, just that difference of that. Just thinking if it's more not recluse, but I wonder how many people these days actually take themselves away. I know monasteries are not what we're looking at. This is not what we're talking about because that's permanent. It's a very different thing. But I wonder how many people could actually cope in a place of being withdrawn, and yet how much that would refresh people if they did find something. I mean, I know even for myself, I'm finding I'm wanting a new area to pray. And I'm trying to work out how can I do that from a sensory perspective. What are the I'd really like a tent because I'd really like that kind of covering. I'd really like that womb space. I don't need it to be particularly dark. I don't need candles. I don't need other types of music. I do need quiet. So it's where can I go that is quiet, but that has some form of tent over me? Could it be in the house or otherwise? It's just let's find those activities that do help us renew spiritually as well as physically and sensory wise.
A little bit random. You won't be surprised completely. There's a film, Kung Fu Panda. In the film, Black plays a panda bear who is like this martial arts thing. Okay, doesn't know about it. That's the whole point of the film franchise. He realizes he's not just a panda; actually, he's a kung fu master. Okay, that's the film. There's no exact. Well, I'm not ruining the end of the film, but there's a beautiful moment when he's trying to find inner peace. Okay, and part of it is he's sitting there all nice and quietly, and he's trying to concentrate. And there's this little drip from a from something, and he's getting so wound up. I'm going to find inner peace, and the aggression grows because there's this stupid drip every so often. And the thing is, we can't control everything, which is a bit that I was thinking about. And you can't force inner peace. It is impossible. It is nonsense because you're never going to have the perfect environment. Does not exist. So the best that you can ever try and do is find a way of finding peace by one, accepting a situation. If you're living in a city, hey, you ain't having it quiet, not ever, not without noise cancelling headphones and earplugs. You ain't having it quiet. So it's working with the environment that we are in. And like for you, it's not the music or the candles for you. For some, that would be really helpful. For you, it's just that silence or perhaps that lack of noise, which is maybe slightly different.
Mm-hmm. And that's certainly different to silence. I think lack of noise is different to silence, which would be very. That's probably quite foreign in some ways. I do enjoy my noise cancelling headphones. Having been on more trips, I'm very aware now of that. I will always go because it keeps you so much more refreshed. Not having that background, that low hum whenever you're traveling on transport, whatever that transport is. And yeah, and I don't have auditory processing issues. When I was in my center, my clinic, and I have swings and lovely hammocks for people to go on and bouncy things and this, that, and the other. And someone was asking me yesterday, what do I go on? And I said, well, I can go on all of these occasionally. I will, but I don't have that sensory need for any of it. I said, yeah, my happy place is the sauna, because then again, there's something that is warm and that is generally quiet and just really suits my needs, and just is such a lovely blessing to my body. So,
But coming back to this idea of the Sabbath is just a way of saying a day of rest. It's a day of not doing your normal job. Okay. Now, generally, US, UK, Western culture, we work a 5-day week, we have a 2-day weekend. In our home, we work a 6-day week. We have a 1 day off because, hey, if that's what God did, good enough for me. So we work 6 days a week. And that's fine. But it is important for that seventh day. When I was in full-time church ministry, your seventh day is not your day off because it's a Sunday. It is the single most busy day of the entire week. So people involved in full-time church ministry would find a different day. For us, I think it was generally, was it a Friday, or I think it was a Monday for us. So we'd have Mondays off because Sunday was really hard. So it's really important to understand that it's not about religiously, dogmatically saying my seventh day is nothing, it's going to get in the way of it. That's back to Jack Black and Kung Fu Panda trying to force quiet. It just doesn't work. And I love the bit in the Bible where Jesus said, well, if your ox falls down a well, what are you going to do? Let it drown until Monday morning? Not really. So we need to be not dogmatic, but there is a difference between silence and turning off the noise. And there is a difference between doing nothing and not being in a place of busyness.
Yes, absolutely. And also the extra spiritual element that it's not, I don't think, just rest, but it's a day that is set apart. So it's even more of a focus, just an opportunity, I think, just to allow the Holy Spirit to speak into you in a way with that busyness and with the noise and with all the other stuff. You don't have time to receive. You don't have time to commune in the same way, unless you've got a really good system set up during the week. But there are things that need to get done. And it's such a precious time to stop. And that's, to be honest, I love going to church. I mean, like that's the one thing that I love to do. This Sunday, just because of the amount of things and the transitions that have been happening in my own life, it's like, actually, this would be a really precious time not to go. I need that space and that quiet. And actually, everyone else in the household was out, which was part of that lack of noise and lack of disruption, just to spend time and just to rest and to meditate and to give my brain just and my body and my spirit time to commune and say, okay, where are we going next? What is going on, Lord? Where I have a new season that I'm moving into, and what do you want me to do with it? Where do you want me to go?
Going back to that sort of not making it not the silence, but the lack of the noise. I think one of the things I've seen in all sorts of ways is we're trying to defeat reality. Let's just put it that way. The military are forever looking at animals and saying, that's good. Let's copy that shape. Was it one of the birds that's really fast? And they looked at one of their big bombers and they've made it look like the front of that because, hey, nature's already good. God already designed it very well. It can go through the air very well. You don't need to rewrite everything. And we copy nature sometimes, but there are other parts where I just think, what you're doing, we're trying to make it. Well, I'm not going to have a day of rest on a Sunday, but I'll have an hour a day, or I'll have 8 hours across the week, and then it's the same. But it doesn't work because it's not about having an hour off. It's about having a day that is set apart to be different on purpose from what you do for the other 6 days.
Yeah, and it's 24 hours. And I think the sense of, because we've been so indoctrinated with the fact that we came from an amoeba and developed that way, that we've taken away the importance of the fact that a day is a day. Yes, spiritually, there are other interpretations and this, that, and the other, but that they relate to different things. But the fact of creation was a 24-hour day. Each day was 24 hours. So there is something set in the way our very beings and the very way that the world is created, that there is something instinctively good and helpful and right about that 24 hours of just setting it aside to do something different.
And I think that's where I find that there's this busyness, not business, but busyness, that it's almost as though we feel like unless we are in that place of busyness, that we're not contributing to society. We're not doing enough. We've got to work harder and go faster. And actually, there's a real value in slowing down. Some friends took a canal boat holiday in the UK one time, and they said you're forced. Is it 3 miles an hour or something on the canals? You can't go very quick. There are speed limits, and they said it was really frustrating. Like, we want to get to the destination. What's going on? And then you realize, you're chugging along at 2 to 3 miles an hour, and actually eventually you think, oh, it's kind of cool. And everything slows down. And there's something really beneficial about forcing ourselves, and it is force, I think, sometimes, forcing ourselves to change pace, not sometimes, but once a week, every 7 days, 4 times a month. We need to actually do that in order to reset things. And from Essential Health, you're always talking about how if someone's going to be going to a big party and it's noisy and that's not good, well, before you go, you reset yourself up. In other words, you do stuff to exercise or whatever works so that when you go into that, you're prepared. Well, effectively, that's exactly what we're talking about by taking a day every week to stop everything you would normally do in order to be ready to do everything you would normally do.
And people don't get it, and I understand that some people that's what it is, but there is something instinctively, intuitively right about that, and it's our loss if we don't. I mean, the Sabbath is made for man. It was designed for our sakes, that we would understand that there is the routines and the flow, and there's different ways of doing things. So it is for our benefit.
So coming back to my first question then about sensory healthy resting, what would that look like? Because we've got 7 days, we've got 24 hours a day. We should be sleeping for 8 hours a day. That's about an average. So you take out the 8 hours from your 24, that's sleeping, and then we've got the rest left. How would it be best for us to most benefit from taking the rest of the 8 hours from the 24? How do we best use that to rest, especially, I'm obviously relating to our senses?
Yeah. I think it would be the balance in that is what is crucial. If you would imagine, if you were you've just spent 8 hours in bed, say you're lying down, you're flat, your head is supported, your muscles haven't had to work apart from breathing, and that's that. Now, if you were to continue lying down for the next 12 hours, that is not a restful place. Your brain and your body would not thank you for that. There is but if you were also on the go, if you were walking for 12 hours, your brain and your body would not thank you, unless you've got really significant sensory processing issues, but they would not thank you for being on the go for all that time. So I think that balance of a little bit of this, a little bit of quiet, maybe a little bit of music, a little bit of it, just a little ease into each of the sensory experiences, because we would want to eat. So we would have gustation, we'd have our oral motor, we'd have our taste and our smell, we'd have a little bit of conversation, but you wouldn't have a full social day. Because you'd be chatting, your auditory, your system would be on the go all the time. Now, we have to watch that in our household on Sundays in particular, because we're a very social household, and it's just like, actually we need to cut. We do stop and think, we've hit our social capacity, but that's often because of our auditory processing and how tiring that can be on the brain. So a little bit of conversation, a little bit of activity, a little bit of your food to enjoy that, but not too much, because that affects you neurophysiologically differently. And then that's why at Christmas everybody falls asleep in the afternoon, because they've just totally overwhelmed their system with sugars and fats and everything else. So just the balance. But finding something, not going to extremes in any of those, in any of the senses, because that won't be helpful.
Balance. I mean, Richard Scott talks about this from a medical perspective, physically, rather than from a sensory health perspective. But he's always saying balance. What's a good diet? Well, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, not a lot of this. Because if you have a lot of something, it's imbalanced. And actually, the reason why we have good, if you get your blood taken, you think you got iron and all these bits and pieces in your blood, they need to be balanced, not identical, because it's not about equality. You don't want exactly the same amounts of iron and I don't know, the other blood stuff. I'm not a doctor, okay? I know there's lots of them, but you don't want equality, because you don't want them all the same, because that would be really bad. But you do need them at healthy boundaries, and I'm not a blood phlebotomist. There you go. I'm not one of them. So I have no clue how much of each one you're supposed to have, whether it's, I mean, is it percentages, milligrams? I don't know. It's a question for Richard in October. But we do need that balance, which is appropriate. And actually, we need a little, in little bits of lots of different things to make sure that we're actually getting a healthy physical input. And in the same context, therefore, of course, if we want a sensory healthy input, we need lots and lots of little bits and pieces of all sorts to make it up.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a key part in the sensory super system that talks about a sensory diet. And that's exactly, we want to be finding the right sensory input for your thumbprint, for the way that you are, for the activities that you're doing. But then also, that'll be an interesting one. Maybe there's something I should bring into my course, or for the Christians who come in, having a little extra something and say, look, what does a sensory healthy Sabbath look like for you?
Which is important because we're living in a world, we've said this before, we're too far away, but there are within the hour, you can go onto Amazon, you can order your food if you've got a local supermarket that's the right one, and you can get it to your house within an hour. Now, we have used a different supermarket, you can get a same day once or twice. If we're really, really ill or we've got something we desperately need that we just can't live without until tomorrow, we haven't got the time, we'll order it. That's brilliant. That's really useful, but it isn't something I would ever want to just be too needing, because I actually like the process of going to a shop and finding the food that we want to eat. I actually quite enjoy that, which is weird perhaps because there's a cooking section. I like the cooking utensils. Okay, that's what it is. But here's the thing. If we are always relying upon the stuff that makes things happen fast, it's going to be very hard for us to enjoy things, not slowly, but a normal, healthy pace, because the ability to get stuff delivered within the hour, as helpful as that can be, perhaps within a business context, not business, is it really important that we can get that headphone socket in the next hour? Because you know what? You can probably use it without the headphone socket, just as an example. Sometimes really good, sometimes not so. Getting your tablets for your medication if you leave it too long, sometimes not good. You need to take it on time. But I think there's so much that does not need to be done in a rush really fast. And I think the one reason why we like holidays, of course, is we go, we stop, we have a different cadence for a couple of weeks or a week or a long weekend, whatever it happens to be. But we can do that once a week and it actually sustains us much better.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when I'm thinking, apart from COVID, it's been years since I've been ill, and that's a blessing. And to be able, and I think part of that is the rhythm and the routine and of certain principles having been put into my life.
I'm really into the word cadence at the moment. It's going to keep coming back all over the place because it's such a really, really good word. And we need cadence in terms of sensory health. If you're overreactive on noise and you have to work in a noisy environment, well, hey, look, you're going to have to find a way of dealing with that. But there are other things you can do to prepare and to come out of that. Because we're all different. And that's where your thumbprint thing,
yeah,
explain that, because I can't think what to call it.
That's perfect, because everybody's so uniquely and fearfully and wonderfully made that I bring out their sensory thumbprint. That's where the assessment of all of their senses and how they're processing their senses, and how they overreact and underreact, or they don't pick up the details, or how all of that fits into their sensory thumbprint.
Thank you for rescuing me out of that hole I dug. I couldn't think how to describe it. I sort of knew the words, and anyway, it's fine. Right, so sensory healthy resting is important. If you're struggling to rest, then contact Anne, and maybe you've got a sensory health issue. Maybe you're overreactive. Maybe you're underreactive, and not doing something is actually stressing you out. And maybe there are things you need to do. That's okay. And that's why I said at the start, it's not about doing nothing. It's not about having silence. It's about taking away the noise, because that is a very, very different perspective. We can't make silence happen. If you're a parent, you know you cannot make silence happen, but you can remove the noise. You cannot have 30 kids around your house. You cannot play music. You can even choose. I know this is a shock for people. If you're a parent of a 3-year-old, you don't have to play their nursery rhymes in the car. We never, ever did. We played Skillet and, if we could, Will Smith and the Cranberries. And now I've got, a household of radio presenters, because you know what? You haven't got to do some of these things that we feel conditioned, and you don't have to rush. Unless you're late for your bus.
Amen.
That's a different thing entirely. And Laure Jackson, I will be more coherent next week. Maybe. If you want to connect with Anne at all, go to our website, pure247radio.org, pure247radio.org/ALJ. That will take you to connect with Anne Laure Jackson of Sante in Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time.
Pure Media, the magazine, comes out on the first Friday every month. Our next edition comes out for September on the 5th of September and will be crammed full of amazing writers, features and columns. If that's not enough, we'll be delving deeper into the life and times of Jennifer Benson from US-based Ignescent. And if you love Lego, we'll be chatting with a man who gets to play with Lego every day. That'll be Josh from Go Chatter Studios. The digital version is always freely available online, and you can enjoy a printed subscription and get a copy in your hands too. Just head over to www.puremediathemagazine.com, where we're always on point and always in print.